let me just I'm gonna play with this for a second and see if it gets you anywhere. And this is I'm just kind of like I don't really know. I'm just kind of trying to sort this out in real time. A couple things I think about. So Tom Berg, when he talks about the closed world of the serpent and the realm of horizontal evolution, like he associates friction and the principle of electricity with this. And this kind of like this is interesting because if you think about it, like all of our energy that we have right now is based on those kinds of horizontal principles of blowing things up, electricity, friction, like all those kinds of forces. What if there is energy that's accessible by considering the vertical dimension? What if there is energy that is accessible through the principles of spiritual evolution?
Right. Well, growth? I think that ties into like what a resurrection body is, Nate.
Right.
So I think that these are bodies, you know, so there's always that debate in the New Testament. Welcome to the fringe, Matt. Yeah, I think that like.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is it, would it be proper to say that the means by which Jesus walks on water and feeds the 5,000 and heals the sick and raises the dead is a technology in some sense?
It's a technique. So yes. I mean, yeah, I do think that, like, I mean, it's hard to parse out exactly. I mean, it's only done through God's power, but the mechanics of that, I'm sure that there's some sort of mechanical or physical aspects to how that.
Sherry gives an emphatic no. I think that's an overly quick emphatic no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what is a miracle?
A miracle is affected on the physical plane. There has to be something happening physically. It cannot just be a naked spiritual act.
It can be a miracle and a doing, and it can still be a technology in some sense too.
Yeah, I think that the problem, and this backs up into the bigger question of what technologies are and how they evolve concurrent. There's convergent evolution of technology and human consciousness. There just is, right? So when we started flint knapping tools, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, that opened up new capabilities like cutting down wood, making fires, cooking animal corpses, those kinds of things that enabled our brains to develop and grow. It is a great tech, Matt. I like cheeseburgers. As we developed things like writing technologies that enabled our language to proliferate. And so technological inputs allow for new areas of consciousness to open up. Doesn't mean that they're not already existing and that they're not already present, but the experience of them are the way that technology works is it's always been hand in hand with our experience of consciousness.
That was okay. So Sherry said something that it has to do with mind and not with body. Okay, yes, but is not the learning? Maybe not even mind. Maybe it's spirit. Maybe it's actually spirit and not even mind. It's nous, I would say, right? So it's not even mind because it's not intellect necessarily. It's the nous. But how do we know that like that the proper use of nous isn't also like a technology? If it's a human making or doing, in some sense, we could still call it a technology. And Jesus is also fully human. And he tells his disciples that they will be able to do the things that he does. Mm-hmm. So should we just give up and say that we can't do those things, that they're impossible? Or maybe the way we're doing technology right now is keeping us from seeing those possibilities.
Oh, we're getting Sherry in. All right.
Yeah, she's going to come in and tell me when I'm wrong. Hey, hey Sherry, good to see you.
I missed the last few seconds while I was connecting, but I heard you say something about what I said, about the
right. So well, let me back up here and let me explain at least the angle that I'm coming from. And this is where I will basically say that technology and magic run on the exact same paradigm. Paradigm is you're using the will, which is not material, to affect the material realm through to achieve some desired end, right? And so technology, magic, miracles, they all run on that same paradigm, right? Is that there is something in the...
Can I qualify that just really briefly?
Of course.
And I would say certainly that is definitely the characteristic of sorcery, which I would say that our technology currently is just a species of sorcery.
Right.
Right?
Totally.
Okay, so the difference with divine magic, which would be what the miracles of Jesus are an instance of, is divine magic, is that it is done in cooperation with the divine will.
Correct.
So that would mean that this is what the missing. So that would point us toward what's missing in our own pursuit of technology, is that we're trying. It's the trying to do it on our own bit of it that makes it continually have unintended consequences and end up having, awful results that we don't anticipate, is because we're trying to do it on our own, which goes directly to what you were talking about earlier. Like we're trying to create our own artificial immortality rather than being on the path of theosis that has been put before us, right?
Right.
So it's like we want our own independent theosis on our own terms. So that doesn't mean that we can't still properly talk about what Jesus does as in doing divine magic as also being, in some sense, technology.
Yeah, so I just think that, like, when we're talking about materiality, we're talking about a realm and a dimension that is subject to certain material and physical laws, that follows certain paradigms. And when Jesus is working his wonders, he is essentially, he's bringing heaven and earth into alignment, but it is having a real material effect. And it's not coming from the ground up, it's coming from upwards down, right? And so the miracles are empowered and impelled through the activity of the Holy Spirit, right? So we could easily go astray as like reducing it to technique, reducing it to magic. I don't think that that's at least what Nate and I are talking about. But I think when we're talking about things that are being affected in a physical way, they're going to have certain physical characteristics and traits. And like, it's not as if Jesus was suspending the laws of physics in order to work wonders. But
no, I actually see this is why I think that it has nothing to do with an actual technique. Like there's another thought I had about divine magic. So if we look at what Tomberg says about divine magic, he says that there's no divine magic without mysticism, right? So you have contemplation, gnosis, and then divine magic, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can't do the magic if you haven't done the contemplation. Mm-hmm. So to me, and I don't know, you guys maybe can talk about this afterwards, but there's something transformative happening in the mind before it happens outside of the body.
Right, because you have to make contact with God before you can't unite your will to the divine will if you haven't even made contact with God. And mysticism is how the contact with the divine is established through concentration without effort, which is the first arcanum.
Right, and the first arcanum runs through the whole deck. Don't forget, right? So this is when you make work into play, and that's what Jesus does with the laws of physics.
This is why I brought Tomberg into this conversation, because I just have this weird intuition that somehow our science is just looking in the wrong places for energy, because within the horizontal plane of evolution, it's all like Tomberg says, it's friction, it's electricity. So we create energy through processes of friction, electricity, and explosions and all those kinds of things. But what if instead we were looking toward the vertical principle of growth and the cooperation with the divine will as a source of energy? So God is the ultimate energy source. Mm-hmm.
Right, then you become a conduit, right? Or a mediator. Like we toil. I often like to think about it in these terms. We're held down to the earth by gravity.
I'm so glad you said gravity. Because
Really?
that's where I was going with this. Because if you think about, okay, Sherry, just bear with me for one moment, because I'm going to go even weirder place with this. Okay, so, a lot of people that think that like what UFO technology is somehow like related to gravitation, right? Mm-hmm. And think about what Tom Berg says about gravity and the vertical gravity.
I remember that. You have to remind me. Give me a hint.
Okay, so that's what draws. That's the reason the hangman is in the position that he is, caught between heaven and earth, is because he's drawn up by the vertical force.
Right.
Tom Berg talks about the vertical force of gravitation that draws up, right? So this is like, maybe there's an energy source that connects us to the vertical gravitation.
Well, okay.
That we're not finding because we're looking at the world in completely the wrong way.
Exactly, upside down. And that's to me another image of the hangman, right? Right. It gives you that impression anyways. Love you too, Nate.
We love her
We
too.
do love Sherry. We all love Sherry. Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to make that point.
Origins, exactly that.
So
Right.
this thing that Slack is saying here, because I don't want PSE is Puget Sound Energy. It's like the power company in our region. I don't want PSE to figure out how to sell it to me, but that's kind of the point. That's one of the reasons that this is one of the reasons we're trapped in the paradigm we're trapped in.
Well, and I think that God
because
providentially has blocked our access to that in this present age. I mean, could you imagine if everybody had like Jedi Force powers? Do you imagine what a mess the freeways would be? Right?
Road
like,
rage would take on a whole new meaning.
The powers of the age to come are not universally distributed for a good reason, right? But I do want to go back to Matt's because I think it's actually a much more interesting question than
What is that word? What is that?
Is sexuality a techne? It's how these bodies get made. I think in a way, yes. If you think about like at the material level, what's happening in the generation of the human body, right? Is you have DNA that functions basically as an information source that tells these cells how they're going to grow, how they're going to divide, what function they're going to have. And this is fairly universal throughout nature, is like cells are like little engines. They're like little machines. And we've described them this way, I think appropriately so. It's the natural world is its own kind of, has its own mechanics, right? Biomechanics, essentially. And what we're talking about with like our technologies is like these cybernetic and electronic and silicon machine dynamics, essentially. That in some ways I think recapitulate or try to mimic some of the things that we see in the biological world. And so, I mean, I think sexuality cannot be reduced to techne, right? Because there's a lot more going on at the spiritual level. Like there's a spiritual union that's happening there, ideally.
Well, also in most cases, we didn't create it,
right?
So,
but it's the method through which we propagate ourselves biologically. That obviously with a lot more going on there. But that's why I think it's important to see, like, where I don't say that like creation is illusion or Maya, but I do see creation as artifice.
Well, I'm going to sign.
Well, technically, sexuality would be techne if, in fact, it is merely a social construct.
Right. It can
if that claim is true, that would make it techne.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Okay, because to me, what it is, it's a limitation, and that limitation is there. You cannot produce another body without a partner. Okay, you can't make a baby by yourself. And that limitation is to teach you what it is, what theosis is to teach you divine eros, is to teach you how God wants to be in love with you. and why.
Right. But that's
And
what you're
that's-
talking about is like the spiritual aspects of sexuality that is not technique. Like it can't be reduced to it, but it definitely encompasses like an actual method and a technique that is tried and true. Like if you copulate, there's a good chance that you're going to conceive.
But is that really what you're thinking about while you're copulating? That you're involved in a technique, and that you're actually,
I certainly hope not.
Well, ideally no, but like in those times where you're trying for a baby.
In fact, ideally, you would be in a state of concentration without effort. Like that's like, I mean, that is like, I would say that this is one of the places where more people have had what is in fact a genuine mystical experience than anything else, because it's the place where it's easiest for us to achieve concentration without effort.
You can be blind, deaf, and dumb. You could be physically handicapped, and you could still enjoy that whole experience. So,
right.
And on that note, I'm going to sign off, guys. Love
okay,
you guys.
Sherry.
Okay.
Thanks for jumping in. So yeah, I mean, there is that side of it. And I tend to, like, at every level, it probably annoys the heck out of people, but I tend to like try to avoid the reductive answer. But yeah, I do think that like when we look at creation as, in a sense, of creation itself is technology. The technology whose purpose is for us to discover our place within God and understand our purpose, right? And so it's a purposive technology. So like if you want to flip some of that simulation type language on its head, it's like, okay, fine. If you want to look at creation as some kind of simulation, or the cosmos as some kind of simulation, fine. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, right? But then you basically just
the cosmos in the Christian sense that I referenced earlier, and in the sense of like Tom Berg's like closed world of the serpent could absolutely be a technology.
Right. And the theosis is what breaks you out of the technique, out of the technology paradigm, and out of the materialist paradigm into the world of spirit. And I do think that like there is a sense of implements in the spiritual world, like the heavenly visions that John has are full of stuff, right? Like an altar and like lamps, and these are technologies. I mean, that's what those are, but they're sacred technologies that are fulfilling a divine purpose. Right. So I do think, yes, technology is a fundamental feature of finite creation. But like in our current paradigm of like a fractured consciousness that's basically under archonic control, right? I'm going to make a pretty staggering claim here. My Christian mysticism has been technologically mediated.
Right.
So, and what do I mean by that?
That's Vervaeke will talk about like spiritual technologies.
Right. Well, in a book.
Jed, this is a technology.
Yeah.
This is a technology.
Yeah.
Like the hesychasm is a technology.
Right.
Like,
and a temple is a technology.
Right. A temple. Exactly.
Right. And so I think that the Luddite impulse, I'm sympathetic toward it, like, because I think the technology can be so ghastly that you just want to say, I don't want anything to do with it. But then if you back up and you say that, like, that's somebody who's writing books, and books are technologies. Writing is a technology, right? And so, and like even our spirituality as people of the book is mediated through the words on the page. Mm-hmm. And of course there's a spiritual element there. Of course there is, but it's mediated through a technological means and a medium. And so like, I don't think that ever goes away. The question is the paradigm from which it operates, right?